So starting with the top, this was like a super duper simple pattern, and I don't remember why exactly I decided to draft it on my dress form versus just flat drafting. But yeah, super simple technique, wrapped my dress form in plastic wrap and then painter's tape, and then traced the design on before cutting it out and transferring that to my fabric. Speaking of fabrics, pretty much all the fabrics that I used in this were from the YALL collection, namely a 4-way stretch pleather, which was like an absolute godsend. For the top, I cut one part from the 4-way stretch pleather, and then I repeated that and cut it from a 4-way stretch black lycra, just to line everything, hold the ladies in place, and provide me a bit more nip coverage when it gets a little cold, because it is Katsucon, and it will be cold in February. From there, I sewed it up pillowcase style, you know, right sides together, then flipped it inside out, aka right side out, and then top stitched along the edges just to help make everything look a little bit better and keep all the stuff in place. Moving into the arm stock things, I didn't really have to worry about dyeing fabric because YALL blessed us so kindly with a pink to black gradient. So instead, I was focusing more on the hot pink lines, and for that, I just used a pre-cut iron-on stretch vinyl. Super duper easy. I am so obsessed with this stuff, and it'll come back later because I used the gold iron-on for the gold stripes on the skirt. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but my first skirt pattern attempt failed, so this is what I learned. Instead of going and doing all this weird pattern drafting on my mannequin, I went ahead and took a nice work skirt that I knew fit me well, traced it onto lycra that had the same sort of stretch that was light enough that I'd be able to draw onto it. I put that on my body, drew out the seam lines, and then cut those pieces out to make the new pattern. And this is ultimately the pattern that I went with, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. The only complaint that I have is that for some ungodly reason, I thought there was a diagonal line across the back of the skirt. Turns out that no, I only need to do the center seam for the zipper, so I might go back and alter that and remove that diagonal line and just have the two halves of the back skirt. I hope that made sense. Oh, but after that little lycra mock-up, I went ahead and made another mock-up out of different fabric just to make sure everything fit perfectly. And then I went and took that to my 4-way stretch YALL pleather. I didn't really want the skirt to stretch a whole lot because I wasn't sure how much stretch the lycra could take and how much it would stretch while walking. So I went ahead and lined it with a non-stretch fabric, which is why you see the darts there. Those were necessary to make the skirt form to my shape, to my body. And then before I sewed the skirt pieces together, I started applying all the gold stripes, and this was such a pain in the ass. It took, I think, 3 days total. I would like start and stop because I would get so frustrated because anytime that I would touch the iron to a piece that was already applied, it would sometimes cause it to bubble or even pull up entirely from the fabric. Speaking of pain in the ass, these claws genuinely made me have like a mental breakdown. I was so on the verge of quitting at this point because I was growing increasingly frustrated with this build, but I'm very happy that I stuck with it. The claws were made from styrene, which is a hard plastic, and I used super glue to help hold them together and a little bit of craft foam on the inside so that way they would stay on my fingers by just pure tension alone. After I was released from claw making hell, I started working on the little back spike things. I still don't know what the hell to call these, so they're just weird back spike tails. But I made them from, I think, 2 layers of 10mm thick EVA foam cut out and glued together. I then sat down and carved out the general shape of the bevels using an X-Acto knife. This would save me time with the Dremel later. Then I sat down and I started taking my Dremel and smoothing out all of the carved edges. This was a pain in the ass. I would really recommend using insulation foam instead of EVA in general because I feel like with that it's much easier to get a nice consistent smooth edge. Once I finished up the big spiky boys, I figured it was time to start on the little tiny diamonds that are inside of there. I used styrene again. I was really worried for some reason about like somebody stepping on these and them losing their shape, so I didn't want to use EVA foam or another soft material. Once I was happy with the shape of the little spiky guys inside of the larger spiky guys, I took my patterns and I traced them onto the Cricut holographic foil sticker stuff and applied them. These were really, really cool. Thank you, Cricut, for making such an awesome product. Like, honestly, I'm really happy with the effect that this gave. After that, I moved on to the Tendril pieces. These were made using formal satin fabric for the quote-unquote lining, like the underside part. And then the iridescent YALL fabric, which I'm madly in love with this. This finally gave me an excuse to use it, and I'm so happy. I put a piece of foam under the YALL fabric, and I quilted on top of that to help give that really cool diamond effect, and it also helped to hide the wire that I ran from the tiny back piece through the tendrils to help hold the spikes up. And with that, my Evelynn costume was finally complete.